My name is John Bandy. I am First Sergeant of ABU Company, 1st Battalion, 327th Infantry Regiment. Today is 25 September, and it is the 60th anniversary of the deployment of the 1st Airborne Battle Group, 327th Infantry Regiment to Little Rock, Arkansas. Their mission was to oversee the integration of 9 black African-American students into Central High School, an all-white school. What ended up happening in the state of Arkansas was the governor at the time, Governor Faubus, decided that he was not going to comply with the federal ruling. What he did at the beginning of that school year was enact the National Guard to provide a blockade against what he felt was federal overreach and trying to push an agenda.
Where do you begin? Where do you look? Like an ancient battlefield, the ground is silent, though people still move in familiar places. Now on this field, Negro and white run together, remembering not how it was in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. Perhaps it is best for those today to look where they are going and not where they have been. But when you're a dark man in a country where the Negro is demanding more and more an equal chance, you have the right to look back to discover if you are really moving forward or if the world is just moving beneath your feet. I have a special reason for looking back. My name is Jefferson Thomas, and I'm one of the 9 from Little Rock. There is nothing strange in seeing 9 American children walking to school on a September morning. But this was a special morning in a special part of America, a place where Negro children had never gone to school with whites before. Hatred is easier to organize than understanding. And there was a minority in our state who found it to their advantage to bring hate to Little Rock in 1957. While we watched, the white children went to school, and we stood outside. We had been taught in school that we were a nation under law, and the law said segregation was wrong. Now we waited to see if our laws had meaning, or were just words in a book, or idle talk in a classroom. On September 27, 1957, President Eisenhower sent 1,000 men of the United States Army to carry out the law. The Supreme Court of the United States had said, "The entire strength of the nation may be used to enforce, in any part of the land, the security of all rights entrusted by the Constitution." And that included my rights and the rights of 8 other Negro Americans who wanted to go to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. We were Terrence Roberts, Thelma Mothershed, Elizabeth Eckford, Ernest Green, Carlotta Walls, Melba Patillo, Minnie Jean Brown, and Gloria Ray. And we were going to school again. Obviously, in this town of 100,000, there were many who didn't like what was happening. But as we looked at the soldiers, we knew there must be millions of others who thought we represented something important. When the doors closed behind us that day, it was both an end and a beginning. From that moment on, we would be watched, not only by those who looked at us as strangers, but by those who wondered if we would live up to our new opportunity. I remember standing there wondering how history would judge us. It's been 7 years since that first day. What has happened? Where have we gone? What have we done?
I was the oldest of the 9, and perhaps the least serious. I came here to Southern Illinois University after graduation. At first, I thought I wanted to be a nurse, but I was too outgoing for that. Now I know I want to work in a newspaper, to be a journalist, and to write. More than anything else in the world, I want to write. This year, I took a job in the university newspaper. I work as a reporter, 20 hours a week after classes. There's no substitute for writing under pressure, to have to get the story out and to make it good. I remember the reporters who came from all over the world to cover the story of Little Rock. To be able to take a story like that and to put it into words is something I've always wanted to be able to do. Someday, I'm going to write a book about what happened in Little Rock. But first, I've got to learn more about writing and about the world. And you can do that best in school. Teachers like Professor Simon have helped me to grow up. He's a man who makes you want to go to school forever. But I'm going to work after I graduate. I've applied to 2 newspapers, and one has already offered me a job. I'm going to miss this university. The friendships I have made here are long and deep. The things I have learned here have helped me to come to terms with myself. For the first time in my life, I have begun to understand why some Americans act the way they do. I know now some Americans have a fear of the Negro, a fear born of a way of life that has been dead in this country since the end of slavery. That's what the mob in Little Rock was afraid of, that the Negro, who had done so much with no chance, might do so much more with an equal one.
It's been 4 years since I stood in this hallway and watched the faces moving from class to class. None of this would seem strange to us now, for we all went on to colleges where there were more whites than Negroes. Except Elizabeth. She went to Central State College in Ohio.
Central State was founded as an all-Negro college about 100 years ago. Today, like most American schools, it is a mixture of Negro and white. When I entered high school, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer and then a teacher. And now, like most students, I haven't quite decided what I want to be. The world is a big place, and when I go out into it, I want to be sure I go in the right direction.
The mission was significant because it showed the utmost loyalty and duty and professionalism of the paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division. It was a display of the highest commitment of loyalty, duty, honor, and integrity that I believe exists in history today. Being a member of this organization makes me proud to get to say that I'm part of this history and this legacy. Lieutenant Colonel retired Bill Robbins actually got me in contact with the former ABU 7 Sergeant Major retired Bob Press. And I was actually able to contact him and get some of the story of Operation Arkansas from him.
The President of the United States put out a directive, and it was the governor of one of his states openly defied his order. And it was not a crazy, off-the-wall order. And a governor, in activating his National Guard to enforce his belief of non-integration, had to be countered. And it was countered in about as forceful a manner as you could do, with as little physical damage done in Little Rock. It just seemed like this would not have happened if he'd have accepted it and used his National Guard to ensure that these children were given the proper education the way they should have. Integration was a part of life, and the necessity of federal troops in that force being necessary to get 9 children to class, even if it took another battle group, it would have been worth it. They took us very seriously, and I think if we'd have went down here and with a company-sized unit, it might not have been taken as seriously as sending an entire battle group and coming down here with fixed bayonets. They knew that we were there to impose the directive from the President of the United States and make sure it was followed. Escorting the children to the classes, to their homes, gave the people of Little Rock a very clear impression that there wasn't going to be any deviation from the order. It wasn't exactly the way I expected to start my tenure with the 101st Airborne Division. I was so proud to be there. I think it might have brought us closer together as a unit. In fact, I'm pretty sure it did. Because once we got back together again with the mixture of black and white and nobody noticing the difference, gave us a better understanding of life in general.
On September 24, 1957, President Dwight D. Eisenhower flew from Rhode Island to Washington, D.C. to address the nation about violent resistance to 9 African-American students attempting to integrate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is the president's 13-minute address where he announced he was sending federal troops to ensure the students' safety.
From the President's office in the White House in Washington, D.C., we present a special address by the President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Mr. Eisenhower discusses the integration problem at Little Rock, Arkansas. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. For a few minutes this evening, I should like to speak to you about the serious situation that has arisen in Little Rock. To make this talk, I have come to the President's office in the White House. I could have spoken from Rhode Island, where I have been staying recently, but I felt that in speaking from the house of Lincoln, of Jackson, and of Wilson, my words would better convey both the sadness I feel in the action I was compelled today to make, and the firmness with which I intend to pursue this course until the orders of the federal court at Little Rock can be executed without unlawful interference. In that city, under the leadership of demagogic extremists, disorderly mobs have deliberately prevented the carrying out of proper orders from a federal court. Local authorities have not eliminated that violent opposition. And under the law, I yesterday issued a proclamation calling upon the mob to disperse. This morning, the mob again gathered in front of the Central High School of Little Rock, obviously for the purpose of again preventing the carrying out of the court's order relating to the admission of Negro children to that school. Whenever normal agencies prove inadequate to the task, and it becomes necessary for the executive branch of the federal government to use its powers and authority to uphold federal courts. The President's responsibility is inescapable. In accordance with that responsibility, I have today issued an executive order directing the use of troops under federal authority to aid in the execution of federal law at Little Rock, Arkansas. This became necessary when my proclamation of yesterday was not observed, and the obstruction of justice still continues. It is important that the reasons for my action be understood by all our citizens. As you know, the Supreme Court of the United States has decided that separate public educational facilities for the races are inherently unequal, and therefore compulsory school segregation laws are unconstitutional. Our personal opinions about the decision have no bearing on the matter of enforcement. The responsibility and authority of the Supreme Court to interpret the Constitution are very clear. Local federal courts were instructed by the Supreme Court to issue such orders and decrees as might be necessary to achieve admission to public schools without regard to race and with all deliberate speed. During the past several years, many communities in our southern states have instituted public school plans for gradual progress in the enrollment and attendance of school children of all races in order to bring themselves into compliance with the law of the land. Thus they demonstrated to the world that we are a nation in which laws, not men, are supreme. I regret to say that this truth, the cornerstone of our liberties, was not observed in this instance. It was my hope that this localized situation would be brought under control by city and state authorities. If the use of local police powers had been sufficient, our traditional method of leaving the problem in those hands would have been pursued. But when large gatherings of obstructionists made it impossible for the decrees of the court to be carried out, both the law and the national interest demanded that the President take action. Here is the sequence of events in the development of the Little Rock school case. In May of 1955, the Little Rock School Board approved a moderate plan for the gradual desegregation of the public schools in that city. It provided that a start toward integration would be made at the present term in the high school, and that the plan would be in full operation by 1963. Here I might say that in a number of communities in Arkansas, integration in the schools has already started, and without violence of any kind. Now, this Little Rock plan was challenged in the courts by some who believed that the period of time as proposed in the plan was too long. The United States Court at Little Rock, which has supervisory responsibility under the law for the plan of desegregation in the public schools, dismissed the challenge, thus approving a gradual rather than an abrupt change from the existing system. The court found that the school board had acted in good faith in planning for a public school system free from racial discrimination. Since that time, the court has on 3 separate occasions issued orders directing that the plan be carried out. All persons were instructed to refrain from interfering with the efforts of the school board to comply with the law. Proper and sensible observance of the law then demanded the respectful obedience which the nation has a right to expect from all its people. This, unfortunately, has not been the case at Little Rock. Certain misguided persons, many of them imported into Little Rock by agitators, have insisted upon defying the law and have sought to bring it into disrepute. The orders of the court have thus been frustrated. the very basis of our individual rights and freedoms rests upon the certainty that the President and the executive branch of government will support and ensure the carrying out of the decisions of the federal courts, even when necessary, with all the means at the President's command. Unless the President did so, anarchy would result. There would be no security for any except that which each one of us could provide for himself. The interest of the nation in the proper fulfillment of the law's requirements cannot yield to opposition and demonstrations by some few persons. Mob rule can not be allowed to override the decisions of our courts. Now let me make it very clear that federal troops are not being used to relieve local and state authorities of their primary duty to preserve the peace and order of the community. Nor are the troops there for the purpose of taking over the responsibility of the school board and other responsible local officials in running Central High School. The running of our school system and the maintenance of peace and order in each of our states are strictly local affairs, and the federal government does not interfere except in very special cases and when requested by one of the several states. In the present case, the troops are there pursuant to law solely for the purpose of preventing interference with the orders of the court. The proper use of the powers of the executive branch to enforce the orders of a federal court is limited to extraordinary and compelling circumstances. Manifestly, such an extreme situation has been created in Little Rock. This challenge must be met, and with such measures as will preserve to the people as a whole their lawfully protected rights in a climate permitting their free and fair exercise. The overwhelming majority of our people in every section of the country are united in their respect for observance of the law, even in those cases where they may disagree with that law. They deplore the call of extremists to violence. The decision of the Supreme Court concerning school integration, of course, affects the South more seriously than it does other sections of the country. In that region, I have many warm friends, some of them in the city of Little Rock. I have deemed it a great personal privilege to spend in our Southland tours of duty while in the military service and enjoyable recreational periods since that time. So from intimate personal knowledge, I know that the overwhelming majority of the people in the South, including those of Arkansas and of Little Rock, are of goodwill, united in their efforts to preserve and respect the law even when they disagree with it. They do not sympathize with mob rule. They, like the rest of our nation, have proved in two great wars their readiness to sacrifice for America. And the foundation of the American way of life is our national respect for law. In the South as elsewhere, citizens are keenly aware of the tremendous disservice that has been done to the people of Arkansas in the eyes of the nation, and that has been done to the nation in the eyes of the world. At a time when we face grave situations abroad because of the hatred that communism bears toward a system of government based on human rights, it would be difficult to exaggerate the harm that is being done to the prestige and influence, and indeed to the safety of our nation and the world. Our enemies are gloating over this incident and using it everywhere to misrepresent our whole nation. We are portrayed as a violator of those standards of conduct which the peoples of the world united to proclaim in the Charter of the United Nations. There they affirm faith in fundamental human rights and in the dignity and worth of the human person. And they did so without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. And so, with deep confidence, I call upon the citizens of the state of Arkansas to assist in bringing to an immediate end all interference with the law and its processes. If resistance to the federal court order ceases at once, the further presence of federal troops will be unnecessary, and the city of Little Rock will return to its normal habits of peace and order, and a blot upon the fair name and high honor of our nation in the world will be removed. Thus will be restored the image of America and of all its parts as one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good night, and thank you very much.
This has been a special address by the President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. This special program has come to you from the President's office in the White House in Washington, D.C.